My name's Beck, I'm 46. I guess genderqueer fits quite well.
My name is Jamie, I'm 25 years old. I think how I identify has changed quite a lot.
I'm Mika, I'm 23 years old, living in Bristol for about 3 years
I'm
now.
Sam.
Came here to...
Depending on the context, I prefer they, them pronouns. I'm an artist.
Around the room there are 5 chapters. Use your body to enter each one in any order.
It's funny when I look at my wardrobe, I've hardly got any items of clothing in there that would be seen as kind of conforming to kind of traditionally female kind of clothing norms.
Looking in the mirror and feeling like that's still the same person, that's still such an affirming feeling for me.
Unfortunately, as an agender person, it's really difficult to find clothes that people would view as neither. So I know my identity, but my expression is very fluid.
I have clothes that reshape my body. When I put them on and I'm like, oh, I'm like not, I don't have a male body anymore. Cool. This is great.
Hello, I'm Angela Chan, and thank you for watching my video. I'm a doctoral researcher with Story Futures, an interdisciplinary research centre based at Royal Holloway and part of the UK's Creative Industries Clustering Programme. We're the Immersive Storytelling Cluster, which means we partner with immersive SMEs and industry to fund projects and make R&D prototypes. And my research explores how creative clusters can be used as an instrument for inclusive innovation. So in my poster, I'm sharing the first case study from my PhD, which looks at 3 prototypes made for Story Futures Immersive Storytelling Fellowship. And in this fellowship, 5 companies come together, each with an academic partner, to explore a certain aspect of R&D, and I followed the heritage case studies. It's the beginning of year 2 for me, so these are really early findings. So my conceptual framework tries to bring together inclusive innovation with cluster theory. Now, Nesta define inclusive innovation policies as those that are directed towards ensuring that the benefits and risks of innovation are more equally shared, that they'll actively consider whose needs are met by innovation, and that they'll focus on initiatives that promote broad participation. So in my methodology, I'm curious about how transferable my experiences as a head of creative diversity in television would be to this new digital immersive sector. So I'm taking a participatory action research approach, using my expertise as a practitioner to support inclusion in the storytelling. These were virtual production ethnographies. Due to COVID, almost the entire R&D process was conducted online. And in my data collection, I'm also doing qualitative interviews with fellows and academic partners and participating and observing production meetings, weekly collaborations and user testing. Afterwards, I analysed the production process, mapping the decision-making around inclusion via decision trees. So a little bit about the research background. The rhetoric of innovation often carries an assumption that technology is a value-neutral process, but there is increasing evidence that overall growth doesn't lead to growth for all, and it's not value-neutral. Bresci and Lassoni and Van Hoyer have noted the exclusionary potential of clusters because just as they bring people together with shared benefits, they exclude others. But the effectiveness of creative cluster programmes for inclusive growth and the benefit to underrepresented groups has, I feel, been under-researched. Jacob and Van Hoyer have also identified a need for more situated ethnographic studies to help us understand these complex networks of power relations that intermediaries, such as universities, have to navigate in delivering cultural policy at regional level. So my research questions: can cluster initiatives play a role in stimulating inclusive innovation in the creative industries? What are the roles and responsibilities of intermediaries like universities in creative cluster programs? And what are some of the potential barriers to inclusive innovation? What type of interventions can be effective in breaking these down? And this is where the case studies come in. So I'm going to tell you briefly about the 3 projects. You can see them all presenting on the main stage of the Beyond conference. And I think these prototypes represent 3 very exciting future paths for digital participation in heritage. The first was Storyality by Arcade, and this really bakes into its DNA the ability to tell stories from multiple perspectives. Tudors Augmented is a clue-based trail game based at the site of Oatlands Palace, one of Henry VIII's former palaces. And you choose your character, have missions, solve clues, and collect coins as you walk about. And one of the most interesting inclusion aspects for me was the user testing. Charlotte Mickelborg, the creator, did some early user testing, asking women and ethnic minorities what characters they would like to hear from. She also built in user testing at the end, exploring how far families with children were willing or able to walk. And her approach offers some real guidance for how we can start to tackle inclusion in heritage in terms of digital and in terms of physically visiting sites. The third project was Your Scans, Your Stories, Your Heritage, in which ScanLab projects looked at the British Overseas Territories and started by sending a 3D laser scanner all the way to the Falklands. And 8,000 miles away, young people between the ages of 15 and 18 were asked to generate stories about what heritage meant to them using thematic prompts. And the stories they came back with were wonderful, really diverse, really inspiring, and really surprising. So the inclusion journey of these projects was fascinating to me. Really, what they were tackling was how to build a template or a format for inclusive storytelling. They had difficult and challenging decisions over which characters or stories to feature and which ones to leave out. And they were working with scalable, affordable solutions. In the case of Arcade and Storyality, they were looking at computer-generated diverse voices, which is somewhat controversial in this era of authentic voices and inclusion. They ended up including an Asian narrator, which is almost seamless blind casting in this context. And they all had accessibility considerations, which came out in the user testing and offer routes for further research. So some of the findings from case study 1. Firstly, the analysis of the production chain seems to be effective as a mode of analysis. And the thematic focus that these immersive fellowships were given led to more inclusive considerations, both in content and form. Participants reported a really strong sense of inclusion as a result of the interaction between the SMEs and academic partners, even under conditions of virtual proximity under COVID. And this virtual proximity resulted in an imagined cluster. Cognitive proximity, defined as shared knowledge bases, goals and culture, really contributed to participants' sense of inclusion, with geographic and social proximity becoming less important. And clusters may be creating significant barriers to inclusive innovation if participation continues to be based solely on SME membership. If we are to include more underrepresented voices, we need to find new ways to facilitate this. Clearly, there are limitations based on the size of the cohort for this study, but I think this initial study shows that there are important insights to further embed diversity at different stages in the innovation process. Well, thank you for watching my video, and if you'd like to get in touch to hear more about my research or share yours, please feel free. Thank you.
name is Dr. Shama Rahman, and I'm the project lead for Away to Mars, a pioneering fashion company. We are now in an R&D phase of building a platform that is AI powered in order to help the creative process.
Away to Mars is a co-creation and crowdsourcing fashion platform. I opened Away to Mars in 2016 with the idea of connecting creative minds from all over the globe. The BFTT project is very important for our company. One, because focus on the methodology behind the platform, and also give us support from very knowledgeable people with a lot of experience to take the company and to take the platform to the next level.
Specifically, we're looking at co-creation between people, but also how can we use the AI in order to facilitate the creative process for individuals as well. We're looking at how this can be an interesting process for both designers and also consumers. What I've been doing so far is experimenting with what AI can actually do. I've been creating a database that essentially is a collaboration effort between the AI and human by utilizing Away to Mars's current collection and essentially experimenting with different types of generative adversarial networks, bringing in elements which are not necessarily fashion. So for example, bringing in mountains or bringing in birds and botanical illustrations, looking at sort of different textures and colors and essentially seeing what could be interesting as a creative sparker and what could also be interesting as potentially a finished product. So we are asking the questions, what is co-creation? And how could we approach the values of encourage exploration by cultivating connections between AI and human to celebrate creativity? We're answering this by designing a game that is engaging, fun, and playful, with the option of everyone playing getting credited for their contribution. In our game design, players are both professional designers and end consumers, where we could provide ingredients such as color, print, and texture as a palette to choose from. We're exploring the concept of an ideas economy, where each idea and contribution to the final collaborative design is rewarded by a token. The game will create the ideas economy, which is both a pioneering concept and approach, highlighting multiple democratizing sources of ideas into unlimited possibilities.
Hello, my name is Rich Hemming. I'm a doctoral researcher at Story Futures, currently studying a PhD in electronic engineering at Royal Holloway, University of London. This is a modern collectibles project specifically looking at implementing procedural and spatial audio in ARKit with Core ML. The Discovery channel partnered with Story Futures for the Modern Collectibles project, and the idea of this was to produce a TV show with an accompanying app, and this was based around objects from the 1980s. My specific investigation was into how immersive audio design for AR can be used to bring objects and the stories behind the modern collectibles to life in the user's hands, and invoke specific emotional responses as well as greater engagement. So augmented reality tools are enabling new modes of interaction and engagement. Schutz coins them new realities, and in fact this is bringing about new implementation paradigms which is beneficial to both academia and industry. And the idea of touch and the notion of touch with digital AR assets, your real hand touching a digital augmented reality asset, is bringing about new experiences with the objects. Early research showed that auditory spaciousness can enhance that sense of immersion, so sound is very important in this particular process. And in fact, these older techniques of ambisonic recording, for example, are becoming more prevalent with extended realities in the way that the experiences are being delivered through headphones. Kalea's user involvement model is particularly poignant, being aware of the mechanics of the kinesthetic, spatial, shared aspects, narrative, and the ludic elements, and these were considered in this design and implementation process. Alongside that, Stephanie Serafin's sonic interaction design is key, and the role that the sound plays in this interaction loop with the object. Physical modelling techniques have been around for a while, and to synthesize this process of sound could actually enhance traditional approaches to sound design. Andy Farnell coins it as procedural audio, and to think about it as sound as process rather than as data. Peter Brinkman, who was one of the lead programmers on libpd, says that it's got a lot of creative potential and expressive potential. For example, if you record fire, and you just have a particular waveform, this can be quite restrictive for implementation. Whereas if you model it with pure data, then you can have some real-time parametric control happening, and some dynamic data can be used to drive the sound synthesis. As we engage with objects, they change and move, for example. The innovative pipeline that we created was use of Unity, ARKit, Cinema 4D, all of these things parametrically driving aspects of patch design, and was then spatialized afterwards as a recommended headphone experience, and we wanted to leverage touch and hold, and velocity of users' hands or finger in order to drive the sound design in real time. The objects were identified particular hotspots of interaction, elements or mechanics of interaction, and were also scalable and turnable as well, which were some really interesting sound design moments. Asset creation, essentially, I went physically to the places to go and get these particular objects, and then they were implemented, and then the audio implementation was there, with all of these aspects being driven through libpd into the pure data patch and then spatialized afterwards. We had success with finger and hand and movement and touch, and here's some in-app shots of it working. The really interesting thing and powerful thing about pure data is that you could interpolate the core ML signal coming in. This is an inherently messy data, and you can actually use Farnell and Heinrich, Christian Heinrich's interpolation methods to control that signal and therefore get a smooth sound design. The core findings were core ML gestural recognition output data is inherently convoluted, it's very dirty data. And now logic can be established in order to present this data in a more usable form, but the more binary that becomes, the less you can use that data to parametrically drive sound design. State checking was something that we implemented in order to figure out whether the object or your hand is intersecting with the mesh. This intersection with the mesh was actually something where we could get velocity and speed, and that was more to drive things parametrically. Pure data is fantastic for this process and in this context because of its control rate and signal rate objects that can scale that numerical information, interpolate it in real time and on an audio sample level. Multiple patch objects can be tied to scale and frequency, etc. And Farnell and Heinrich's early research in their techniques are highly functional in this context. We will be conducting an online survey as this project is work in progress. We're looking for 100 participants to do that, using a repeated measures design, looking at things like enjoyment, shareability, replayability of the level, focusing on the sound and audio conditions, and all this will be done remotely. Early results have actually indicated that immersive audio design, coupled with the gestural control, does have a positive impact on engagement in the context of AR and contributes to bringing the modern collectibles to life through invoking nostalgia. Thank you.
The research interactive media and nonlinear participatory narratives of mental health is about using the narrative qualities afforded by interactive media to create engaging nonlinear films shaped by people who have a direct experience of mental health problems. Participatory film is a practice where participants produce films on experiences close to them, and in the context of mental health, it can be key to counterbalance many stereotype views presented by mainstream media. Participatory filmmaking is a group practice where every participant is an author, and it is often challenging to streamline many different voices within a linear narrative structure. What if instead interactive media could allow us to create truly polyvocal films where every viewpoint is represented? With our research, we're exploring this possibility by choosing an existing linear film called Stepping Through, and by working with the participants who created it to design, film and implement an interactive version of the film. Stepping Through Interactive, assembled in Cutting Room with the technical support of DC Labs at the University of York, is a poetic interactive film where many different storylines convey both communal and individual views of participants, and where viewers can explore participant stories by selecting feelings that resonated the most with them, with a view of establishing an active and empathetic dialogue between creators and viewers.